Men can barely understand themselves, yet somehow they're confident they understand women. Plato never wrote those exact words, but if you read him with ruthless honesty, the message is there, hiding in plain sight. Plato didn't hand out dating tips. He didn't write how to win women manuals. He went after something far deeper, the blindness men have toward the forces shaping their own minds. Long before men learned to chase beauty, long before they melted at the sound of a woman's voice, Plato had already diagnosed the real disease, the untrained mind, which becomes the perfect playground for deception. You probably remember the allegory of the cave from the Republic. Prisoners chained in darkness, staring at shadows on the wall, believing those shadows are reality. They worship the illusions. They build their entire lives on lies projected by others. But here's what Plato doesn't say outright. Those shadows aren't just political or social. One of the most intoxicating illusions ever projected onto the mind of man is woman. Not woman in her truest form, but woman as an idea, a carefully crafted projection that keeps men distracted, compliant, and emotionally enslaved. Plato warned us that people will fight to protect their illusions. And for men, no illusion is more seductive than believing women are pure, innocent, and incapable of manipulation. This is the grand stage where men lose themselves. A woman smiles, and the untrained man calls it love. She cries, and he calls it sincerity. She touches his hand, and he calls it destiny. Plato would laugh, not because he hated women, but because this is exactly the behavior of a prisoner refusing to turn toward the light. He's living in shadows and calling them truth. Plato said the beginning of wisdom is knowing you know nothing. Yet most men define woman by what she shows them, not by what she truly is. They study business, politics, and war, but almost never study the nature of feminine influence. And that's exactly why women can dominate the emotional landscape of men without lifting a finger. A woman doesn't need to scheme. She doesn't need to act like some evil mastermind. She simply reflects the ignorance you refuse to confront in yourself. Plato once said the worst deception is self-deception. Men convince themselves they're rational when it comes to love, but they're not. They are prisoners, and the chains aren't on their arms, they're wrapped around their thoughts. Here's Plato's brutal truth. It's not women who manipulate you. It's your illusions about them. She smiles, you fall. She pulls away, you chase. You hand over your power and call it devotion. But Plato warned, those who live in the shadows will reject the truth when it finally blinds them. You might think your heart is pure, your intentions noble, your love righteous. But if you could step outside yourself, as Plato asks of every philosopher, you'd see a man mistaking chains for wings. In Phaedrus, Plato describes the soul as a chariot pulled by two horses, one noble, one wild. The noble horse longs for truth, reason, and discipline. The wild horse craves pleasure, beauty, and temptation. And here's where most men fall apart. Every time a woman enters the picture, the wild horse snaps the reins and charges. It pulls you toward her laugh, her scent, her curves, her attention. And you, the driver, weak and untrained, let it drag you straight into ruin. You don't question the horse. You call it falling in love. But for Plato, this wasn't romance, it was spiritual slavery. In the Symposium, Plato describes love as a madness sent by the gods, a madness that blinds men, consumes them, and makes them worship the image of beauty while forgetting the essence of truth. Yes, he calls it divine madness, but it's still madness. Unless you master it, you're nothing but a pawn, worshipping shadows. Here's the twist. Women understand this. Whether consciously or instinctively, they know men are ruled by this madness. They don't need to be malicious to destroy you. They only need to exist in your mind as the prize. Once you put her on a pedestal, you no longer see her as she is, you see her as you want her to be. And that, my friend, is how you end up manipulated, not by her, but by your own mind. Plato feared the corruption of the soul more than war. He warned that a man who cannot govern himself will always be governed, by tyrants, by flatterers, by anything that feeds his weakness. And tell me, who flatters your ego more than a woman who knows you crave her attention? she becomes the puppeteer. You dance for her approval. You think she's playing the game, but the truth? The game started inside you long before she ever appeared. The real game is the war within you, the constant battle between your higher self and your base desires. Every time you choose pleasure over principle, she doesn't need to defeat you. You've already done it for her. Plato said the just man doesn't let the lustful part of his soul dominate. Yet here you are, negotiating with your emotions, hoping she'll choose you, validate you, complete you. That's not love, it's building a new cave for yourself, one with golden bars and velvet chains. When was the last time you truly stopped and asked yourself why you chase women? Not why you like them, not why you're attracted, but why you chase. Is she leading you toward truth, or pulling you deeper into illusion? Most men never ask that question because asking takes courage. It means admitting you've been wrong. It means facing the possibility that the love, devotion, and destiny you've built your life around might be nothing more than smoke and mirrors. Until you're willing to face that reality, until you stand like the philosopher Plato speaks of, staring into the blinding light, you'll stay a slave. Not to women, but to the idea of women you refuse to question. Plato knew society runs on stories, myths designed to keep people obedient. And nowhere is this more obvious than in the story men have been told about women, that they complete you, that they're your better half, that they hold the keys to your happiness. In the Republic, Plato says the masses should be ruled by those who've seen the truth. The tragedy is, most men never rule their own minds. They let their appetites run the show. Plato split the soul into three parts: reason, spirit, and appetite. Reason searches for wisdom and truth. Spirit seeks honor and recognition. Appetite? It just wants pleasure and comfort. And when it comes to women, most men live entirely in appetite. She smiles, you feel pleasure. She texts, you feel validated. She touches you, you feel alive. But that's the lowest part of you. The part Plato warns must be ruled by reason, or it will drag you into ruin. This is why women have such terrifying influence over weak men. She doesn't need to challenge your intellect. She doesn't need to respect your mission. All she has to do is feed your appetite, and you'll trade your soul for another taste. Like a man dying of thirst in the desert, you'll crawl for a drop of her validation, while she holds the water you could have created yourself if you had self-control. Think about it. Men betray their families for a stranger's touch. Men destroy their empires for a woman's approval. Men take their own lives because she walked away. What more proof do you need that most men are ruled by the weakest part of themselves? Here's Plato's greatest warning, hidden in plain sight. No man is free who is not master of himself. It doesn't matter how rich you are, how many followers you have, or how many women you attract. If she can break you with a glance, you're still a prisoner. In the Laws, Plato says the downfall of a city begins when men let pleasure overrule discipline. And isn't that exactly what we see today? A graveyard of men who've sacrificed their strength on the altar of feminine approval. You see it in politics. You see it in religion. You see it in culture. Men apologizing, bowing, submitting, not to truth or principle, but to the fear of losing her. Plato never told men to hate women. He told them to see clearly. The woman isn't your enemy. She's a mirror. She shows you your lack of discipline, your blind spots, your hunger for validation. She plays the game because you pulled out the chair and invited her in. But you can flip the board. You can leave the cave. You can take the throne in your own mind. But only if you dare to face the one thing most men fear, the truth about themselves. Plato hinted at something the modern world hates to hear. Women test men for one reason: to reveal the weakness that's already there. She's not causing your downfall. She's showing you who you really are when the mask comes off. In Gorgias, Plato says it's better to suffer injustice than to commit it. Why? Because the man who commits injustice proves he's a slave to his desires. And here's the brutal irony. When you chase a woman, compromise your values, betray your mission, and beg for her validation, you're committing injustice against your own soul. You think you're serving love, but really, you're violating yourself. Plato taught that the highest harmony a man can achieve is ruling himself with reason, living in alignment with truth, not temptation. But look at how the world programs you. Movies, songs, and advice tell you to fight for her, prove your love, sacrifice everything for her approval. In the Republic, Plato warns about persuasive flatterers who rule the masses, and who flatters your ego more than a woman feeding you exactly what you want to hear while you give her everything she wants. Women, whether they know it or not, understand that a man addicted to validation will always be easy to control. She doesn't need to outthink you or beat you in an argument. She just has to make you feel like a king, and you'll destroy yourself trying to keep that feeling alive. You'll call it love. But it's not. It's emotional slavery with a crown on top. Plato didn't just talk about individual men, he talked about entire civilizations. He watched Athens crumble because leaders surrendered discipline for pleasure, just like modern men surrender their souls to please women. The sickness is the same. The disease of the untrained soul always ends the same way, collapse. But Plato also gave the cure. The highest purpose of a man is to pursue the good, to climb out of the cave, to face the light even if it blinds you. The hardest step? Daring to see the woman, not as a goddess, not as a curse, but as a mirror. She reflects your undisciplined appetites, your fragile ego, your hunger to be seen. Do you have the courage to face that reflection? Can you stand there, not as a beggar, not as a slave, but as a man who governs himself first? Because until you do, you'll always be played. You'll always get caught in the game because you've never mastered the player inside you. When you finally see this, when you step into the light Plato spoke of, you'll never look at women the same way again. Most men live in constant fear of losing a woman's favor. Plato teaches you to fear something far worse, losing your own soul. In Phaedo, he writes, "The soul takes on the character of the actions it pursues." If you spend your life chasing validation, your soul becomes weak. If you make her attention your highest pursuit, your soul shrinks into something small and unworthy of greatness. Here's the brutal truth. Every time you bend your values to keep her, every time you swallow your truth to please her, every time you trade your mission for her emotions, you're not loving her. You're betraying yourself. Plato makes it clear, betrayal of the self is the root of all injustice. Why do tyrants rise? Why do civilizations fall? Because men refuse to govern themselves. Because men would rather serve pleasure than truth. And here's the twist, women will test you to expose this weakness. She'll push your boundaries to see if you'll stand firm. She'll withhold affection to see if you'll beg. She'll challenge your convictions to see if you'll betray them just to keep her close. Every time you fold, she loses respect for you. Deep down, she knows, a man who can't rule himself can't rule anything, not his life, not his future, not his legacy. Plato's idea of the perfect ruler wasn't a conqueror, it was a philosopher king. A man who has mastered his soul, who seeks truth above all else, who isn't shaken by the games of the masses. If you can look into her eyes and see, not a goddess, not an enemy, but a mirror, you become what Plato called the just man. And the man who rules himself cannot be manipulated, cannot be broken, cannot be played. So here's the challenge, stop chasing shadows. Stop worshipping illusions. Stop trading your soul for temporary affection. Stand up. Look in the mirror. Face the parts of yourself you've been too afraid to confront. When you do, you'll never fear the games women play, because you'll have outgrown the need to play it all. If this message lit something inside you, if it shook you awake, don't let it fade. Like this video, share it with a man who needs to hear it, and subscribe. We're building a brotherhood of men who refuse to live in the shadows, men who dare to rule their minds, their lives, their destiny. Support us by following the link in the description. Join us in the pursuit of truth, mastery, and freedom. Because the world doesn't need more men chasing illusions. It needs men who've burned them away.